Good afternoon, Amp bikers. This is Matthew with Ampt again. Today we're doing an interview with Andy May from Fillauer. Andy is an amputee as we are as well, and we're going to talk to him a little bit today about his story, how he became an amputee, and some of the challenges and struggles he went through as well. And he's also, as I said, working with Fillauer, and he's going to give us a little bit of information on the different product lines they have, over some of the specific feet. And I'm one of the amputees that uses their legs. So anyway, welcome, Andy. Thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me today.
No problem. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do with Fillauer, what you do for fun, just who are you? Who are you?
Yeah. So like I said, I'm Andy. I reside in the Bay Area in California. Been an amputee now, going on my 21st year of being an amputee. Been active all those years of my amputated life, plus even before that. So I came into this deal as an active person and as an athlete, as a mountain biker, as an endurance athlete. So I was fortunate when I lost my leg that I had sports and that a part of my life. I work, I'm the U.S. sales manager for Fillauer today. I've worked in the industry of prosthetics for, I'm going on 10 years now. Before Fillauer, I worked for Cascade Orthopedic Supply, which is the second largest distribution company in O&P. So I worked for them. So one thing that was great before my job with Fillauer, a distributor gets to try sell a lot of different products and a lot of different feet. So I have a lot of exposure during that time of really being able to try a lot of different things. So I haven't tried everything, but I certainly have, at least walked in the parallel bars, so to speak, on a lot of the products that are available to all of us out there. So I definitely have an opinion about certain things, but I always try to keep my opinions, I merely say it's merely my own personal choice and things, but I love the industry and I love being a part of this side of kind of where we're at. And before that, I was actually just a bike racer. And before that, I was racing mountain bikes and doing triathlon and just kind of doing my thing before working in the industry. So I've got a lot of experience in the bicycle world as well.
Are you a BK or an AK?
Oh, sorry. So I am a below the knee amputee, left side.
Okay.
Lost my leg, like I said, almost 21 years ago, a traumatic motorcycle accident, just going, two wheels have always been an adventurous thing for me, whether it's pedal or throttle are two things that I've always enjoyed. And someone just ran a red light, not anyone's fault or anything like that, just pinned me right there, pretty much in the intersection, just down a couple towns away from me. They amputated my foot pretty much right away, and a couple days later they took a little bit more of my calf, so they did make me a below the knee at that point.
Was it severed at the seam, or was it crush syndrome?
It crushed at the seam. So as I always say, it kind of looked like a sock, with a bunch of marbles in it kind of scenario. So it was pretty much gone at that point. From what I don't have a whole lot of recollection. From your last interviewee that you had done before, he was talking very much about how present he was at the moment. I certainly was not. My wife's a much better storyteller of what kind of happened after the fact, because I was out at that point.
Was she there for everything?
Well, she got to the hospital, and she certainly was the one that said that we have to amputate your foot because there's really nothing left. And I don't really have a whole lot of recollection of that, just because I think trauma had taken over and the body was protecting itself at that point. But I certainly agreed to it. But it certainly was the best choice I could have made, obviously, because I never would have returned to the sports that I love and the life that I have of today, for sure.
How long after your accident were you able to get into a prosthesis?
It was pretty quick, actually. I mean, luckily, like I said before, I had athleticism and youth on my side at the time, so I think that definitely worked in my favor. I was on a temporary prosthesis probably 4 weeks post-op.
Wow.
So it was very soon, maybe too soon. There's a lot of stories. I mean, I go back to the old days, like my process, like literally in the room he was taking out my stitches, and we just did our thing like right there. and he put
Now, is
me
that
in,
something?
streamers and everything.
Sorry. So was that something that you were kind of pushing for, or was that the prosthetist kind of said, "This
It
is
was the
my
process. I
normal"?
mean, I think he knew who I was, and I think he knew that, being active was important to me, and that was really if there was any concern in my life at that point of after losing my leg, it was I was scared of not being able to do the things that I love to do, and it's kind of a funny story. I mean, my story kind of it still kind of amazes me sometimes, and it's because I'm a cyclist that actually got me into prosthetics and the industry that I'm in. And the quick story that I have on that was, I was racing cyclocross and cross country mountain bikes forever and ever, and Fox Racing was a long time sponsor of mine. I mean, since I was 22, I had just a shock sponsor. I mean, they weren't paying me or anything, but they were giving me just product as a local racer, and they were giving me shocks. And when I lost my leg, Fox Racing, I don't know if you remember this, how much history you have, but the old the Pathfinder foot that Ohio Willowwood used to make with the shock, the shock on the back, which is made by Fox Racing. So Fox, actually, that was a special project that they used outside of the bicycle industry, making that foot, and they actually called Ohio Willowwood on my behalf, saying, "We got this kid that we've been sponsoring. He just had a traumatic accident, and I don't know what you can do for him, but we make you this special foot." And literally on my morphine drip bed, 5 days after my being amputated, Ohio Willowwood called me and said, "We have this new foot that we came out with a couple of years ago, and we're trying to get athletes and people out there to test our products. And do you want to do this?" And I was kind of like, yes. I wasn't really sure because, you have it, at that point, I mean, the prosthetics that I knew of was, remember the old movie, The Fugitive, like where Harrison Ford goes in and there's all the dangling legs and the arms and stuff in there.
Right, exactly. Yes, so not true. Yeah.
So not true and so far from what it was, but that's all I had, at that point. It's some sort of a weird reference, but I always think of that movie. But, but my wife and I took a leap of faith, and, and at that point, someone was reaching out to us saying, "We want to help you." And literally 3 weeks later, I was on an airplane with my wife, and we were flying out to Mount Sterling, Ohio. And they not only helped me get my first prosthetic, but they offered me a sponsorship as a racer and as someone to get out there and try to beat and damage product and to do all this stuff. And I really, so it's through, and I still say to this day, I mean, it was through cycling that got me into the back door of prosthetics. And to this day, I have a wonderful relationship with the Willowwood family and what they had always done for me. And I still wear their liners and things to this day. I've since moved on foot-wise, but it's a foot that I'll always remember and I'll never forget. And it was always, so literally, fast forward from that point on, I mean, I really had no time to sit and feel like, I should feel sorry for myself. Now I was being offered these things to get out and to be this cyclist in some sort of way, which I had to figure out. And there was a lot of steps along the way that I had to figure out about how to make a socket to, drop trim lines in the back to make sure that you can pedal and you can do things and make sure your socket's not hitting your bike and all this other crazy stuff that first year. But, I returned to my first cyclocross race 10 months after I lost my leg.
Wow.
So, and since then, I had been racing for forever and ever, and I officially quit racing about 6 years ago. But I still ride my bike and run every day, one or the other.
So a couple questions for you then.
Yeah.
So you're not racing with the Pathfinder anymore, or you're not riding with the Pathfinder?
So I raced with the Pathfinder for 9 years. So I used that foot, and it was actually kind of a standing fun joke with Fox Racing at the time. Since then, they've gotten a lot more cooler athletes than when I was there. But Bob Fox's big joke was I was his only athlete that could use 3 of his shocks at the same time.
I'm not sure if you're
suspension, rear suspension,
and your leg. Yeah,
here's this weirdo guy with his leg.
With Biodapt, the Biodapt feet. Mike Schultz.
Oh yeah. So Mike's amazing, man. Yeah,
he's crazy. He's one of my sponsors. And Mike came out to our first event, and he took it the one step further. So now he's running with 4 shocks because he's got one in the knee, one in the foot.
Exactly. Yeah. Mike's a big show off. I've known Mike. I've known Mike forever, and and it's so great, man. I mean, I get so excited today to see a guy like Mike and to see, even arm amputees. I mean, there were some people who came out after me that were they were above elbow. There's a guy up in Canada who put a shock like right here to basically replicate his elbow. So when he would do these big drops off stuff, something would be shock absorbing off it. So I mean, it's so neat to see people just be so creative and so innovative. And Mike is certainly one of those guys I hold in my heart, because he took a product and made it his own to make it work for him, and it's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of creativity out there. We had a gentleman that came out to our first event who was an arm amputee, and honestly, just about all of us bikers, when he showed us his setup, were cringed, because the way he had it set up, he had a physical link to the right side handlebar, and to get out of it, he had a ripcord that he had to pull. So he had to let go of the handlebar with his left, grab that ripcord, pull it to disengage his right arm. And we're like, whoa.
Wow, that's crazy, man.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your rehab. And so, I mean, it sounds like you didn't have time to even think about what happened. You just went straight into it.
I did. And, I mean, like I said, I mean, so here I am with Willowwood doing that. And then, a lot of, just, local people finding out that I was doing this thing, and Bianchi, who's a big bike company out here, well, it's Italian, but they have a big factory here in California, offered me a bike sponsorship to race for them, so they were giving me bikes, and they were saying, all right, let's go do these things. And I guess I just felt the pressure a little bit to get out and be like, I've got no time to sit around and feel sorry for what really happened for me. I've got to figure this thing out. And I would rehab, and I would train and just get out on the bike every day. And really, I mean, that was, when I talk about training, I mean, it was kind of like the trial and tribulations. I mean, I think you got to get out there and just see what's going to work. And there were certainly times of frustration, like I said. I mean, I'm sure we all remember our first year of being an amputee, of how big that first socket was, right? And that was a big frustration of mine, because here I am with this big leg, basically knocking on my $5,000 carbon bike, right? And I'm like, I got to get this dang thing away from my, from this frame from hitting. So the engineers at Willowwood said, well, hold on 1 second and let me see your clipless pedal. And they actually made a little like 1-inch shim for me to basically put my pedal in, to put into here, to put into my crank, which basically pushed out my prosthetic side 1 inch away from the frame, so I wouldn't have to do anything. And that was really the only modification I ever did to a bicycle. I mean, as a BK, I mean, it's pretty easy, in my opinion. I mean, I think we have it easy compared to many, but that was really the only thing I ever modified at that first year, was just to make sure, I had the spacing right. But once my socket was down the size and I shrunk down, I just use regular SPD now, and it's not a big deal.
So 2 questions from that. I actually had a gentleman from Missouri reach out to me and ask the question. He's a road rider, and he's a BK as well. And he keeps running into issues where the back of his leg and behind his knee, he's getting sores. He's having issues with his sleeve. He's running Willowwood as well. Okay. And he's basically taken the sleeves and cut out the back of it because he's getting pinching and all that. Okay. So what would you recommend for this gentleman?
Sleeves are always hard. I mean, I use sleeves for a long time riding road bikes, just because I'm not a pin fan by any means. I don't like pin lock systems, but the pin system is actually the only time the only time I use that system is when I ride my mountain bike. And the only reason I do that, and I actually happen to have my leg right here, I can show you. It's the only time that I use a pin system, which is Willowwood's. It's their clutch system lock.
That's the ratchet one, right? Where you can
so basically
put it in.
Yeah, so you can actually, with a socket wrench, you can actually pull these guts out and just replace this whole piece. It's really nice, actually. So when it gets gunked up with mud and things, I can just replace it. And what's nice about it is with a pin system, I can really take my trim lines really low. I mean, they're lower than low. I mean, because I'm really only using this for cycling. I mean, I always tell amputees, if you can finally get to a point where you can make a leg specifically for riding, it's great, because I would bring your bike to your prosthetic shop and just focus on the ride. Don't think about walking in it or be safe about it. I mean, get in and out of a Starbucks or
Same here.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Be simple, because we're talking about just riding, right? I mean, it's a simple act, in my opinion, to do that. But I mean, that was always been my solution. I mean, you could certainly, it sounds like
You're cutting that line down pretty low then on the backside,
yeah, it's
and
pretty
actually on the
low.
sides as well.
Yeah, it's low profile. I mean, my knee, I don't like big wings on the sides anyway, just because I think it just thrashes your sleeves.
And your
Just
pants,
even
and yeah,
my everyday leg, I don't like them to be, I don't like these ears to be too long, because it just, you'll just be replacing sleeves all day, and that drives you crazy.
agreed. Absolutely agreed on that one. Um, so I would agree with you. I would say I had the same thought. Make sure it's cut down low enough in the back. I am a pin and sleeve guy, and my first concern, and tell me if this is founded or not, was when you get the suction sockets where the suction sleeve's on the outside, you're riding, you go down on your knee, that sleeve's done. You're just gonna blow through it. That's what I was
Yeah.
always concerned about. So I mean, what do you think on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, and I mean, that's the failing point of the system, right? I mean, once you get a hole in there, I mean, the suction technology in there, your leg's just going to move more. So it's not necessarily that your leg's going to fall off per se, but now you've got a passageway for that air to basically get in there. Whereas, my pin system, even if I'm a little bit loose, I can carry a couple of socks in my bag, and it's not a big deal. I can add or delete as needed to take up some of that space, to do that. And it's a system that I found to work really well for me. And I also say, as far as a foot, I mean, you definitely don't want anything that's a super dynamic foot or some sort of a moving ankle foot. I mean, you almost want it to be as pegged as possible. I actually, I'm going to show this to you, but this is something that we made at Fillauer for me. But it is basically just a straight carbon pylon, and my pedal is directly bolted to the bottom, and that's it. I've got a little bit of tread that I glued on there, and that is it. Very,
So
very simple, very archaic.
how do you know what? Simplicity is the best, honestly.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so let me ask this: with
Yep.
that, how does it feel on your mountain biking when you're going over some really rough chatter where you're bouncing?
Yeah, I don't really feel it per se. I mean, obviously, you're still relying on your sound side more than anything, in my opinion. I mean, you're still absorbing that as much as possible. But obviously, this is the longest carbon shank I've ever had. I mean, this is longer than my Pathfinder that I used for 10 years. So I think
I'm
it
looking at
absorbs. I think it
Yeah, I'm
absorbs
looking at
really
that
well,
going,
and
wow.
it's super lightweight. And it's simple, and I cut up a lot of carbons. I don't know if you probably can't appreciate this on a Zoom, but this is, my regular foot size is a 27 centimeter. This is about a 23, 24.
That makes sense. Yeah, you
So
don't want that. You don't need that big keel out there.
you don't need all this space out here, and you want to get this, your contact point of where your pedal is as close to your main line as possible. But it depends kind of where you want. I mean, there's a lot of amputees who just have pegs, right? So they just stick their cleats right under here, and they just make a peg leg, right? But I find to be most comfortable if you can get that pedal a little bit just forward of your main line of weight.
Well, yeah, because you want your knee to ride in a comfortable position. If you're too far
Yeah.
forward,
Well, exactly.
yeah,
And I used a peg system for a long time for road, and I always found like it was comfortable, but then on my upstroke of pedaling, I always felt there was like this dead spot, like going forward. So I feel like with my, my clipless pedal being here, I've got a very nice pedal rotation in relation to where my leg is.
So I want to go back a little bit and ask you a
Yep.
question. Like we were saying, you kind of got pushed into this amputee world in a
Yep.
whirlwind of stuff within just a few months.
Yep.
At any point after that, did you catch your breath and then stop and think, I'm missing my leg now? And how did that affect you if you did have that thought, and what happened? How'd you deal with that?
For me, I mean, I really have to give props to my family and friends and those who were around me in my life at that time, that they certainly, gave me their support and were there for me. But at the same time, they also didn't really give me any leniency either. So I had all my buddies who I ride with to this day, who I call my boys. I mean, they were all on racing programs at that time, right? And they were like, Andy, we feel super bad for you, and we want to be there for you, but I got this race coming up in a couple months, so I got to go. So if you want to come, that's great, and they really didn't slow down for me or really allow me that time to settle in. And there were moments of frustration on those rides. I can tell you there were actually, I was riding in Fruita, Colorado, with some friends. We were on our way to Vail. We were going to the World Championship mountain bike race out there like years ago. And we stopped in Fruita to do some riding, and I just couldn't keep up with them. And I just remember just being so frustrated. And like, I literally stopped, not like I had tears in my eyes, and it was more just out of like frustration of just, how can I be faster? It wasn't about me being an amputee or anything else and trying to give excuses to myself, but I was like, how do I make this be more of an opportunity? And it was me going to my process and figuring out my socket once again, and trying to deal with those trim lines and to get more comfortable and to do all those things. So I guess I've always been that person to try to look for the solution, as opposed to sitting back and saying, woe is me. And I guess I never allowed my amputation to, I guess I would never want it to be an excuse for not doing things. And I guess the time where I always felt the best was when I was racing and when I was biking. When you're on the trail and you're following someone on a single track and you're kind of doing it. I mean, for those first few years, you kind of forgot for a minute that I was an amputee, and all I was concerned about was getting in front of this dude who had two legs and how great it'll feel that this amputee passes up this able-bodied guy and makes him feel bad.
I always joke with my buddies, because I tell them I want to get a shirt, and on the back of it says, "You just got passed by a one-legged fat guy," and on the front it's like, right. "What are you laughing at? You just passed a one-legged fat guy." So you lose either way.
Well, and I was always looking for the challenge, and I don't like being told no. And there's a few years there that I was on a real single speed kick. So I was single speed racing for a couple of years, and so here I am on a one geared bike and an amputee. I actually had a shirt made that, gears and legs are for, what I won't say it on here, but I had a shirt made like for that, right? Because I mean, I was proud of the fact. I mean, I was proud that I was an amputee, and I was, following the trail of those before me who really helped me. And that's another point. I mean, when I lost my leg, there was no Facebook, there was no great real online things for us to find resources. And Challenge Athletes Foundation, I got to meet a lot of folks through them, like Paul Martin and One Arm Willie Stewart, and guys who had been racing and doing this way before me. And I really leaned on them for their advice and their support. But then through what they gave me, I kind of had to find my own comfort and my own thing. Like you can't, one thing I've learned in prosthetics is you can't replicate someone else's system. Like everyone is unique in this, and your leg and my leg, we can't share, unfortunately.
Nope.
But
and even if we could, we wouldn't like it, because we each have our own preferences and how we walk, right? How we want.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. I mean, I feel like you're kind of paving a trail and of time and history from what's been done and what guys were found successful. Okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to find my own success, and then now I'm not doing it as much, but for the next generation, or for that next kid who's the next Hucker trail enduro guy, I hope I can provide him, the next resource for him to to take our sport to the next level, right? And I think that's what it's all about.
Did you notice a speed difference? I mean, did you notice your times? I mean, after you got rehabbed, after you got your physically back where you wanted to be, was there a comparable time difference between when you had your leg and when you didn't?
There was. I mean, I don't think I'm as fast as I probably was like in my early 20s, but I think the one thing that I did get, I remembered when I first lost my leg, I looked back at how many like races that I had done that I just quit. Like it didn't feel right, or the weather was too bad, and I was cold, and I just remember, it doesn't feel right, and I would just pull out. And it didn't happen all the time, right? But ever since I became an amputee, I never allowed those excuses to enter my mind. and I never quit a race as an amputee ever. So I feel like my mental toughness and inner strength got stronger. And I don't know. I think a lot of amputees that, which especially around trauma, the pain that I felt when I lost my leg on my motorcycle was so excruciating, so awful, and the phantom pain that first year that all of us kind of deal with, and some still deal with. I mean, everyone deals with it, things their own way, but nothing ever hurt as much as that to this day. And I never allowed that ever to enter my mind. And even if I'm dead freaking last, I'm gonna finish this thing, and that's how it is. And that's always been my attitude. And and I think mentally I got stronger for sure as an amputee.
That's really awesome. That's really awesome. So you said 21 years now.
Yep.
So you're married? You were married at the time?
I was, yeah. So just married, and just out of college. So that perfect time to lose your leg. And I've got 2 girls now. So I got one she's a graduating senior this year. So she's college bound this year. In between San Diego and University of Arizona. So haven't decided yet, but that's kind of what we're doing now.
San Diego.
And then my youngest, she's a sophomore in high school. So yeah, both are swimmers, both athletes, both kind of doing their own thing. Didn't take dad's path of cycling, but that's okay. Being active in our house is a big thing. And I always tell my kids, just to pick a sport, try to pick something in your life that you're passionate about. And they both certainly have. And then my wife, of course, my wife and I are high school sweethearts. So we've been together for a long time. Yeah, so it's
so how do your 2 questions on this? How did your wife respond? How did she handle the amputation? And how do your girls handle it?
It's funny. I mean, my wife, I think for that first little bit, certainly didn't coddle me for sure, and she certainly helped me in anything that I could do. I mean, she was certainly my emotional rock and support through those times of frustration. And I certainly, like I said before, I don't want to come off like I was so hard I didn't have any feelings of losing your leg or anything like that. I mean, there were some days where that you cried and you didn't understand why it happened to you, and she certainly was there to be that shoulder for me, to be that support person, but always allowed me to follow my dreams and to do those things. And I think at that point I had so much to prove to myself in terms of returning to the racer that I was, and to be the physical person that I was, that she really took on a lot of responsibility in our house. And I will say, more on the financial side, I mean, there's a reality there for all of us, right? That we have to pay the bills, whether we're amputees or not. And she allowed me to be this athlete, racer, biker guy while she was out in San Francisco, making money and keeping us fed and doing a lot of those great things. I mean, and she was amazing. It's not that I didn't work, but I mean, I had to do side jobs and to do not as good jobs, I guess I'll say. So I had time to train.
It's not cheap there either.
No, it's not, and it's, so she has been my support, forever. And it's certainly, I think, empowered our relationship as a result of that. It's certainly one of the biggest challenges we have come across since being together. And since then, I mean, it's, I don't see us ever not being together as a result of that. And my kids, it's funny. I mean, they don't know any other. I mean, they don't know me as anything else. So it's really funny for them when they see old photos of me with 2 legs, because it's just like, that's weird. And it's always funny when they look at it like, that's weird. Like, that's the weirdness, is like me with 2 real legs versus a fake leg.
No, I get it. And I had my own answers already in my head, because being a congenital amputee, I met my wife when I didn't have a leg. And so it's just been natural. And I've got 5 kids. My oldest is in college. My second oldest is graduating this year. I have a freshman and then a couple younger babies. And they don't even think about it. They'll bring friends home or over, and I meet their friends, and their friends are like, he's missing his leg. And my sons are like, so yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's just, and we've always just been active. I mean, I'm always running around on my running blade, or riding my bike, or camping, or paddleboarding, or backpacking. It's like, it's just normal. I mean, for them to see all this stuff. I mean, I think it's almost abnormal when I'm sick or I'm not doing stuff. They're like, "Are you okay, Dad?" Like that's the weirdness for them, because it's just ingrained in my personality of just who I am, and it's I got into, like I said before, I mean, into prosthetics and orthotics kind of selfishly because I was trying to find solutions for myself, initially, but then I really started falling in love with, well, how is a foot made and carbon, and that's weird, and what's this this rush foot that's out there that people talking about, and it's resin based, and I mean, I'm just intrigued and interested, and I think that's how I kind of found my footsteps kind of into where I'm at today. So I mean, fast forward into the time of not racing anymore. I mean, you can't keep that up forever, and I really wanted to get, I call it the real job, and try to be in the industry. And once again, I was out in Ohio getting some legs made, and my old boss at Cascade, John Cronin, who's the director of sales and marketing at Cascade, was there, and he was building the sales team, and we're going to get out into the field and we're going to show the world who Cascade is. And they were hiring at the time, and I kept his number, and 6 months later I had a job with Cascade, and it was my first O&P job that I was out in the field, and I was visiting O&P shops, and it's I guess once again just feel so blessed in this industry that I don't want to say it fell into my lap, but I mean in many aspects it kind of did. I mean, and I learned so much at Cascade about other people's products, because at that time I really only knew about Ohio Willowwood at the time,
or what you wore, what you used,
what I was using. Yeah, so I used that to my advantage, and and luckily for me, Cascade sold all that stuff, so I certainly I leaned on that for a long time until I learned other products, like from Oser and Alps and Fillauer and other people. So I did that for a long time.
So tell me a little bit about Fillauer's products. I know that they've got a wide selection of feet to look at, blades and all that.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of the basic ones for maybe an entry level amputee that's just getting out there walking. They're just trying to get moving again, and all the way up to the ones where, like you and I, we're out there, we're hiking, running, and all that.
Yeah, so I mean, Fillauer is one of the oldest O&P manufacturers in America. I mean, they're over 100 years old, based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We're a global company, so our headquarters are in Chattanooga, but all of our high-end composite feet are made out in Salt Lake City. So they're made in the U.S. All of our feet are made in the United States. And then we're also in the heavy equipment. So we actually have a factory out in the Carolinas. So all of if you ever go into an O&P facility where you see like ovens and the Troutmans where they're like grinding and things, that's our product as well. So we do capital equipment as well. And then we have a whole upper division as well. So we do upper myoelectrics and your passive hands and things also. With feet, I mean, for a new amputee, I mean, we literally have a foot that's called the K2 foot, which is a low activity foot. It's a short build height foot. That's definitely it allows the foot from heel strike to toe off to make it a little bit easier for you. So a little less resistance on the toe, which, for a first time amputee, you don't want that resistance, because sometimes it's hard, with your if you don't have the strength to carry over that right away. And then, the foot that we're really, our flagship foot, I literally took this off. This is our All Pro foot that we're really known for. It comes in a 6-inch, 8-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch height. So the one that I prefer, this is the 10-inch. It has a rotatable pyramid here. And what I mean by that, so the pyramid will actually allow you to adjust your angle back versus forward. So it actually will allow you to have more toe lever. So if you really kind of want to run on it, or if you like to play softball or do things like that, it's a great foot for that. The great thing about the All Pro, is everyone can see this curvature shape. It looks like a running blade, right? Which I have right here. This is my running blade. That's kind of right here. As you can see, it doesn't have a heel on it. So not all sports, are really conducive to a running blade. I mean, so there's a lot of sports out there that you really do need to have some sort of a heel. Like if you're running bases on a baseball team or a softball team, or Obstacle racing is huge right now. So the Spartan obstacle racing, I mean, blades are great, but only for running. I mean, in my personal opinion, and that's,
running
yeah. So
forward.
exactly. We wanted to come up with something that was a little more versatile, especially in a billable world that people have to pay for these things. And unfortunately, running blades are not something that insurance companies have deemed to be worthwhile, and they don't, and it's just, they're very difficult to get an insurance company to reimburse for them. So we wanted to come out with something like the All Pro that will allow you to do a little bit of everything. And I kind of call the All Pro the 80% foot. And I say that to, that I think 80% of someone's active lifestyle, you can get away with that foot and actually bill your insurance company for, and actually have it be a product for you. I think once you start becoming that elite athlete, like we were talking about before, like I have a specific leg for riding and you do as well. I think that's that 20% that, you kind of want to start honing in on those exact sports to make it more for you at the end of the day. But I think that the All Pro foot is really the foot that we're known for as a company, that most people seek us out for at the end of the day.
And I'll be honest, I'm a follower. I love that foot. I've used it for years now. And I showed you earlier my older foot, and you said there's an older version. I'm not sure about the one I'm on right now. I think it's probably 3 years old.
Okay.
But I mean, I love the activity, the action in it. You get a lot of spring, I guess the best way to say. There's a lot of energy return coming off of something like that. So it's great, and
Absolutely.
It's light.
Well, and it's crazy, man. I've been with Fillauer. I mean, I'm going on 4 years now, almost 4. And it's so interesting to me because I had one of the earliest All Pros that was made, and even when I was at Cascade, and I had a plethora of feet to select from, right? I mean, they carried a lot of different feet, but it was the foot that I constantly wore, and it was a foot that I was always comfortable in. So even before my job with Fillauer, I was wearing that foot 5 years before that. I mean, it was just a foot that always, like you, I mean, it was comfortable. It was something that I could run with my kids with, and I could run with my dogs with a little bit, and I didn't have to put my running blade on to go do those kinds of things, because it's just not something that you need to do all the time. I mean, a running blade is great if you're just running, but sometimes you got to chase your kid into the parking lot, and that All Pro always seemed to work well for me with that. So, I'm a firm believer in that foot.
So that running blade that you showed us, is that a Fillauer foot as well?
It is. So yeah, so this is our Obsidian Blade. It's typically, I painted this thing. This thing is painted all blue. But our blade is actually a split blade. So I don't know if you guys can see me actually move this thing.
Yes.
It is split all the way through, which is really good for ground compliance, especially if you like to run a little bit of trail and to take it off-road a little bit. It's really nice. Our tread on the bottom, this is a recycled car tire. So it's actually like a tire tread system. So it's actually really nice and strong, which in other systems that I've had in the past, you just wear through those things super fast, and you're replacing them twice as often. And this one, because it's a little bit harder material, it's definitely something that's going to hold up a little bit more.
So can I do a special request and have a Maxxis Minion tire tread put on there?
Right, exactly. I would love to do that.
That'd be awesome.
Totally. I used to do that actually on my old running blades when I was doing Xterra and stuff. I actually took old mountain bike tires and I would glue them on.
Nice. That's so cool.
I mean, you got to flatten them out and figure out how you're going to bond that. But I mean, I did that for years, forever. And the Xterras, a lot of times, they would act, my running these days, I'm not doing anything super extreme, but the Xterras, a lot of times, a lot of those guys will wrap all the way down, because if you're running on a terrain that's this big, you don't want it to be slipping off the back. So a lot of times those extreme athletes that are amputees will actually tread up and over the curve many times.
That's crazy.
This particular blade, it's actually really fancy. Also, it actually is. You can see here, this is a direct lamination on the back here. So there is no metal on here at all. The only metal that's on here is that small little valve.
Wow.
Just to allow the air to escape. So this leg is 100% carbon all the way.
Now, I almost went with a rear-mounted foot at one point.
Uh-huh.
but I was really afraid. Actually, there's a version of the All Pro that's rear
There
mount,
is.
correct?
Yep, there
Yes.
is. Yep.
And I thought about doing that because my stump I have a longer stump, so I do have that issue. But I was really concerned that with the direct mount, you better be spot on your adjustment, because
Absolutely.
once it's on, it's on.
And that is the absolute truth. And luckily for us, I mean, I don't have the thing here. I'll have to send it to you. But we actually, Fillauer came up with an alignment bracket back here that you can actually, during your check socket time, we actually have an alignment bracket that you gunk the socket to, and basically it allows that whole area to slide up and down here and give you some rotation and some things to make sure that those things are right before you take it to lamination. Because you are 100% correct. Once you laminate, I mean, this is forever. There's no, I don't want to say it's forever. I take that back, but it takes a lot of work to cut this out if this isn't right. And that's why a lot of people still like to use the 2-bolt system in the back, simply because it's the weight, certainly the weight is there, but it's socket weight. It's not distal weight down here. So really an amputee is not going to feel that weight per se.
Right.
And going with the 2-bolt system, if something did happen to the blade, God forbid, it's something you could take off and replace and call me and say, hey, I've got this issue, and you don't have to replace the socket, so to speak. So it just depends kind of what you're after. But I will say this is definitely a stronger over a greater area. You're definitely you have greater contact with your prosthetic versus these 2 bolts that are just going in there, and that's where the weight is basically being carried. Whereas here, the weight distribution is over a greater area. So it is a strong way to go, but it's something you definitely have to commit to.
You're right, exactly, and that's why I shied away with it. Went back with the 6-inch blade that went underneath the socket, and I don't have much of a choice because, like I said, my stump is long. I can't go with those longer feet, and I'm right at the limit.
Yeah. And and a lot of guys are really successful. I mean, some of our more successful posterior patients are long because their legs can be really long and they've got this big nice pylon in the back. So you've got a lot of cool carbon lever to bounce on that you might not have ever felt before too. So I mean, it's something you should think about. I mean, or at least.
And yeah, I was going to ask that, because I have heard there is a different dynamic with the rear mount versus the under mount.
Oh, absolutely. And some of our more successful patients have been long. Because as long as you're not contacting the bottom of the blade, I mean, you'd probably love it if you ever got a chance to try one. But that's
on my next leg.
Hey, right? Let's see what we can do there.
That'd be awesome. So, sir, rumor has it, or there's a potential that we might get to be able to see some of you guys from Fillauer out at some of our events coming up this summer.
Yeah, I've got them on the books. I mean, with the COVID situation and everything, it's kind of, the pandemic seems to be, subsiding, so to speak. I mean, life still seems to be kind of returning to somewhat normal again. So I'm super hopeful to hit up some of your guys' events, especially, the one the 2 I've earmarked. I got one earmarked for the Oregon, and that Moab one looks really sweet. For sure.
Those are gonna be awesome. So,
well,
we have.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say the Rogue River one. That's just up north from you, probably about a 7-8 hour drive. But that trail system is an incredibly fun trail system.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, and luckily for us, I mean, we have a lot of guys at Fillauer who ride. I mean, Nate and
yep.
All of our composites guys ride. So Eric Ruby, I don't know if, he's since, he's still working for Fillauer, but he's definitely more on the retirement side these days, but he's certainly working still for us. But, he's a huge mountain biker, and he lives in Salt Lake City, and he's an exceptional rider. So we'll have to maybe convince some of those guys to come, or maybe, stop off in Salt Lake and do some riding on the way to Moab or something.
That would be awesome. Well, sir, I really appreciate your time today. This has been a great time just getting to know you and hearing your story. And I look forward to meeting you in person and get some riding done.
Hey, absolutely. And, thank you for having me today. It's been great.
Anytime. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Yeah. Take care.